Get out. A bastard born from a mistress will never be fit for decent company. Victor Harrington stood in the center of the living room, jabbing a finger toward the front door. Spit flew from his lips and landed on the untouched birthday cake sitting on the coffee table. The housekeeper, Mrs. Bell, had bought that cake, hoping that for once the three of us could sit down and have a meal together on my 22nd birthday. I paused for half a second, then kept folding my clothes into the suitcase. Isabella Harrington stood beside Victor, arms crossed, not even trying to hide her smirk. Dad, don't get yourself worked up. She should have left ages ago. She's had the nerve to leech off us for years. I zipped the suitcase shut. The sound cut through the room like a clean snap. I looked up at Isabella. She was wearing a cream-colored Chanel tweed jacket, pearl earrings so large they caught the chandelier light and threw tiny rainbows across the wall. Yesterday, she had taken the only photograph I had of my birth mother and tossed it into the kitchen trash. I fished it out. So she ran to Victor, sobbing that I had cursed her mother to die. Victor smashed 3 vases in response. What are you looking at? Isabella stepped closer. Your mother was a homewrecker and you're a thief. Did that photo have your mother's name written on it? I didn't answer. I pulled the suitcase handle up and walked toward the door. Wait. Victor strode over, pulled a checkbook from inside his suit jacket, and scribbled furiously. He tore the check out and let it flutter to the floor near my feet. $10,000. Take it and never show your face again. Your mother made me a cuckold for 10 years. I've fed and clothed you until 22. That's more than generous. The check drifted down, the corner landing in a smear of buttercream frosting. I bent down, picked it up, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my pocket. Victor sneered. Of course you'd take it. Gutter blood always wants money. It's child support, I said. The law says you owe me that much. Isabella burst out laughing. Oh, now she cares about the law? Did your mother care about the law when she trapped a married man? I pushed the front door open. The September wind rushed in, rattling the birthday card propped against the cake box. Isabella, I said, glancing back over my shoulder. All those earrings, those necklaces, those designer bags. You won't get to keep a single one. Her smirk flickered for half a second. Then she rolled her eyes. You're insane. The door closed behind me. Outside, the maple trees that lined the driveway were half bare, leaves skittering across the cobblestones. I dragged my suitcase down the long gravel path toward the main gate. The security guard in the little booth poked his head out, took one look at me, and ducked back inside. I pulled out my phone and searched for the most expensive hotel in the city. The Ritz-Carlton, penthouse suite. $4,000 a night. I booked 3 nights. The receptionist behind the marble counter gave my battered suitcase a long, skeptical look. Then she swiped my ID, and her expression shifted in a way that was almost comical. Miss Evelyn, your suite is on the top floor. Shall I escort you up? No, thank you. The elevator doors closed. Mirrors on all 3 sides reflected me back at myself. Hair falling out of a messy ponytail, a white t-shirt so old it had gone soft and thin, jeans faded at the knees. I looked like someone who should be asking for a job application, not a room key to the penthouse. The suite was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the entire Boston skyline, the Charles River a dark ribbon cutting through the lights. I set my suitcase flat on the luggage rack and unzipped the hidden inner lining. Inside was a manila envelope. I pulled out the documents. Stock transfer certificates. Shareholder agreements. 43% of Harrington Enterprises, legally transferred to me by my birth mother, Margaret Vance, in the final months of her life. Margaret had used every legal maneuver she could find to move those shares out of Victor's grasp before she died. Victor still had no idea. He thought he had been the victim of an unfaithful wife. He never knew that the entire company was built on Margaret's initial capital, her ideas, her relentless work while he played golf and posed for business magazines. I took a long bath, ordered room service, lobster bisque and a glass of Chardonnay, and sat by the window watching the city glitter. Halfway through the soup, my phone rang. Isabella's name flashed on the screen. I declined. It rang again. Declined. The third time I picked up, Evelyn. Her voice could have shattered glass. Did you leak Dad's company problems to the press? That article online, did you write it? I took a spoonful of bisque, swallowed slowly. What article? Don't play dumb. The one about Harrington Enterprises cooking the books, the tax evasion. It's already got over 100,000 views. Dad's phone is exploding. Oh, I dipped a piece of bread into the soup. What does that have to do with me? I got kicked out, remember? You wait. Dad says you must know something. If you dare. I hung up and turned the phone off. The city lights blinked below me. I pulled the folded check out of my pocket and held it up to the window. $10,000. Victor Harrington, you're about to find out what that 10 grand really bought. The next morning, I turned my phone on at 8 o'clock. 47 missed calls. Victor, 43. Isabella, 4. I brushed my teeth, pulled on a crisp black silk blouse and tailored trousers, and ordered breakfast. Fresh berries, poached eggs, espresso. At 9 o'clock sharp, Victor called again. I answered. Didn't say a word. There was a long pause on the other end, full of heavy breathing. Then his voice came through, low and tight, as if he was forcing the words through clenched teeth. Evelyn, what have you done? I set down my espresso cup. The little clink of porcelain against saucer echoed in the quiet suite. Dad, I said, calm as still water. You'll want to take that check back. What? $10,000. It's not enough. I'm asking you about the article online. The article wasn't me. I cut him off. But I know who wrote it. His breathing got heavier. Who? Get down on your knees and beg, and I'll tell you. Evelyn, I am your father. Yesterday, when you threw me out, I said, dabbing my mouth with a linen napkin, you said something different. I ended the call. 3 seconds later, he called back. I didn't answer. 5 minutes after that, the hotel room phone rang. I picked up. Miss Evelyn, there's a gentleman in the lobby, a Mr. Harrington, who says he's your father. He's asking to come up. Tell him to wait. I hung up, grabbed my bag, and left the suite. I had an appointment with my lawyer at 10 o'clock, right downstairs in the hotel's cafe. The lawyer's name was Arthur Shaw. He was the last person my mother had hired before she died. Early 40s, close-cropped hair, black-framed glasses, spoke in rapid, precise sentences. He slid a folder across the table. Margaret's final wishes have been almost fully executed. The shares in Victor's name were legally transferred to you 5 years ago. Per the agreement, you have the right to call an emergency shareholder meeting at any time and elect a new board. I flipped through the pages and nodded. However, Arthur pushed his glasses up. There's a complication. Last month, Victor privately mortgaged some company assets with a bank. If you trigger a takeover now, the bank might call in the loans. Harrington's cash flow could collapse. Then let it collapse. Arthur looked at me for a moment. Harrington Enterprises was your mother's creation. It was her creation, but it became something she never wanted. I closed the folder. Do you remember what she said to me in her last months? Arthur was quiet for a beat. She said, if Victor treated you well, these documents would never need to see the light of day. If he didn't, he called me a bastard. Arthur said nothing. He lifted his coffee and took a sip. All right, he set the cup down. Then we proceed as planned. The shareholder meeting is set for Monday. I've notified all the relevant parties. Does Victor know? He received the notice this morning. A small flicker crossed Arthur's face. Word is, he threw his computer monitor against the wall. I smiled. My phone buzzed again. Victor. I answered. Where the hell are you? His voice cracked. I'm standing in your hotel lobby right now. Get down here. I'm not at the hotel. Don't lie to me. The front desk said you just stepped out. Then you can wait. I hung up and turned to look through the cafe's floor-to-ceiling windows. Down in the hotel plaza, Victor stood next to his black Mercedes, Thai Askew, shouting into his phone. Isabella hovered beside him in a beige pantsuit, her expression pinched and furious even from 2 floors up. I snapped a photo with my phone and sent it to Arthur. They've got time on their hands. Notify them of one more thing. What's that? When Victor kicked me out, He gave me a $10,000 check as a severance package. I want his personal bank records pulled. Find out if that money came from a personal account or the company accounts. Arthur was already tapping on his phone. You suspect embezzlement? I don't suspect. I lifted my espresso. I just need the evidence. Victor stood in the plaza for 40 minutes. I watched from the cafe as he paced, took call after call, snapped at Isabella, paced some more. Finally, he got into the Mercedes and drove off, nearly clipping a planter on the way out. Isabella didn't leave. She stayed by the entrance, making phone calls, her face growing paler with each one. At 2 in the afternoon, I went back up to my suite. The moment my key card clicked in the door, I sensed movement in the hallway. Isabella came charging around the corner, her acrylic nails stopping an inch from my face. Evelyn, what kind of game are you playing? Do you have any idea what's happening to Dad's company? And you have the nerve to stay in a place like this? Did you pay some reporter to write that article? Tell me. I swiped my card again and pushed the door open. She shoved her way in behind me and stopped dead in the entryway, mouth falling open. The penthouse living room was bigger than her entire apartment. Where did you get this kind of money? Her voice wobbled for the first time. Your father gave it to me, I said. $10,000, remember? 10,000 wouldn't cover 3 nights here. You're right. I tossed my bag onto the sofa. Good thing I have more than 10,000. Isabella stared at me, her lips bloodless. What is that supposed to mean? I walked to the window and stood with my back to her. Isabella, when you were 7, you broke your father's antique Ming vase. I took the blame for you. She froze. When you were 10, you stole a classmate's electronic dictionary. I hid it for you. When you were 15, you got caught sneaking out with a boy, and the school called your parents. I pretended to be your mother, and went to that meeting. I turned around. I was good to you, wasn't I? Isabella stepped backward and bumped into the coffee table. A water glass wobbled. So now I'm done pretending. I picked up the manila envelope from the couch and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Read this carefully. It's the certificate of stock ownership change for Harrington Enterprises. Every share your father thought he owned was legally transferred into my name 5 years ago. Isabella took the paper. Her hands shook so badly the sheet rattled. She read it 3 times. Her face cycled from white to red to a sickly gray. Impossible. Dad would never. He doesn't know. I took the paper back. Your mother doesn't know either. When the transfer documents were signed, your father thought they were for a different investment agreement. He signed without reading. Isabella dropped onto the sofa, eyes blank for 2 full seconds. Then she shot to her feet. You planned this. You've been pretending to be meek and harmless all these years, just waiting for today. I didn't reply. She lunged at me, trying to grab my arm. I sidestepped. She stumbled and caught herself against the window glass. Outside, the sun was sinking, staining the skyline orange and pink. Isabella pressed her forehead to the glass, shoulders shaking. Evelyn, her voice came out raw, you destroy him, and what do you get out of it? What do I get? I walked back to the coffee table and poured myself a glass of water. This morning, he called and demanded to know what I had done. I took a sip. What could I possibly have done? He told me to leave. I left.
He threw money at me.
I took it. He called me a bastard. I didn't say a single word in return. Isabella turned around. Her eyes were red, but she was biting her lip, refusing to cry. What do you want? I want him to say it out loud. Just once. I set the glass down. Margaret Vance was not a mistress. Victor Harrington married up, and he spent 22 years pretending otherwise. The room went silent for 3 full seconds. Isabella's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and all the remaining color drained from her face. She answered, listened, made 2 small sounds of acknowledgement, and hung up. Then she looked at me, her lips trembling. Dad's been arrested. Oh. Someone reported him for embezzlement and tax fraud. The authorities took him from the office in handcuffs. I nodded. Who reported him? Isabella was staring at me like I was a stranger she had never met. You set this up ages ago, didn't you? I smiled but didn't answer. Wait. Her eyes widened as a new realization hit. You set this all up before he even kicked you out? Isabella. I walked over and picked up my jacket from the armchair. What your father said yesterday wasn't just about me. She looked confused. He said a bastard born from a mistress will never be fit for decent company. I shrugged the jacket on, doing up the buttons one by one. Do you know who the real mistress was? Isabella's face went ashen. Your mother. I pulled the door open. The hallway air rushed in cool and sharp. Your mother was the one who wrecked a marriage. She just played her cards better. She made Victor believe I was the child who should be hidden away. I stepped out. The door began to swing shut behind me. Isabella's voice tore through the closing gap, high and desperate. Evelyn, come back here and explain yourself. I didn't look back. The elevator descended, floor numbers ticking down. My phone buzzed. A message from Arthur. Interrogation scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow. Federal investigators are involved now. I typed back. Good. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. A man stood in the middle of the marble foyer, his back to me, studying the large abstract sculpture in the center of the space. Black suit, broad shoulders. He turned when he heard my footsteps. Young, clean-cut, with an unreadable expression. He held a cream-colored envelope in one hand. Evelyn Vance? His voice was low and calm. Who are you? A friend of your mother's. He held out the envelope. Margaret asked me to give this to you on your 22nd birthday. I took it, but didn't open it. She's been dead for 5 years. I know. A faint smile. Which means she wrote this letter 5 years ago. She told me that if Victor treated you well, this letter should never be delivered. If he didn't, I said. The man nodded once, turned, and walked away through the revolving doors. I stood in the lobby and tore the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of notepaper, yellowed at the edges. Margaret's handwriting, a little rushed, a little uneven from the illness. Evie, if your father ever tells you to leave, you make sure he's the one who ends up on his knees. Below that, a smaller line almost squeezed in at the bottom. Don't be scared. The only thing I ever did right in this life was having you. I folded the note carefully, tucked it back into the envelope, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. My heart squeezed painfully. Even in her last days, she had been thinking of me, arming me with words that now felt like prophecy. I wanted to tell her I wasn't scared, not anymore, that I would make him kneel. I pushed through the hotel's brass doors. The September air hit my face, cool and clean. My phone rang again. Victor's number. But the voice on the other end was Isabella's, sobbing in ragged bursts. Evelyn, the investigators are saying Dad could go to prison. Can you please help him? I stood on the top step of the hotel entrance, watching maple leaves skitter across the plaza. This morning he called me, I said. He asked me what I had done. On the other end, only weeping. I didn't do anything, I said. All I did was take back what was already mine. I ended the call and walked down the steps. Leaves crunched under my heels. Victor's voice was still looping in my head. A bastard born from a mistress will never be fit for decent company. I glanced down at the envelope in my pocket, then lifted my head and kept walking. Tonight, I'd need to switch hotels. Arthur had warned me that after tomorrow's shareholder meeting, the media would be hunting for me. I wasn't afraid of the press. I was just tired. I had taken maybe 20 steps when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered. Miss Vance? This is Daniel Cross from the Financial Times. I'd like to request an interview regarding the arrest of Harrington Enterprises CEO and the reports that you are now the majority shareholder. I stopped walking. Where did you get that information? Anonymous email, the reporter said. It arrived in our newsroom around 3 this afternoon. Attached was a copy of your shareholding certificate. I stood still on the sidewalk, phone pressed to my ear. Anonymous email. I hadn't sent it. Arthur wouldn't have acted without my say-so, which meant someone else was already pulling strings, exposing the truth before I even stepped into the spotlight. A chill ran down my spine. Was it Nathan, working behind the scenes to accelerate the reckoning? Or had my mother planted yet another guardian angel I had yet to meet? Miss Vance? Are you still there? I'm here, I said. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. My company's conference room. I'll give you an exclusive. I hung up and stayed rooted to the spot for a long moment. A black sedan with tinted windows pulled up silently to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing the same young man from the lobby. Get in, he said. Someone's been digging into your background. You're not safe walking around alone. I'll ask again. Who are you? Your mother asked me to watch over you for 5 years. He leaned over and pushed the passenger door open. Get in. I'll explain on the way. I studied him for 3 seconds, then bent down and slid into the passenger seat. The door closed with a solid thunk, and the car pulled smoothly into traffic. In the side mirror, I caught a glimpse of a man in a baseball cap standing near the hotel entrance, phone pressed to his ear, his eyes tracking our car. See the guy in the cap? The young man said. I see him. He works for either Victor or your stepmother. I haven't confirmed which yet. So, you showed up today with that letter just to get me out of the hotel? He smiled faintly and didn't answer. The car made 2 quick turns, and the baseball cap disappeared from view. Only then did he speak again. Your mother found me years ago. She told me that if anything ever happened to her and Victor treated you badly, I was to give you that envelope. How did she know Victor would treat me badly? She knew Victor would eventually figure out the shares were gone. He spun the wheels smoothly. What she didn't expect was that he'd be stupid enough to throw you out of the house before he realized it. I leaned back in the seat and watched the streetlights flicker past. What's your name? Nathan Shaw. Shaw? Any relation to Arthur Shaw? He's my older brother. I let out a small laugh. So, the two of you have been hiding my secrets for 5 years? Longer than 5 years. Nathan slowed the car at a red light. Your mother started setting this up the year she was diagnosed. She brought my brother in from the beginning. She knew she was going to die? She didn't know for sure. Nathan turned to look at me, but she knew exactly what kind of man Victor was. The light turned green. The car moved forward. We passed a massive digital billboard, Harrington Enterprises logo glowing against the night sky, with a tagline, built on integrity, driven by vision. The car left it behind in seconds. Yesterday, when Victor threw you out, Nathan said suddenly, was that on purpose? What do you mean? You could have triggered all of this a year ago. Why wait until your birthday? I watched my own reflection in the car window. Because I waited 22 years for him to wish me a happy birthday. Just once. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Did he? He told me to get out. The silence inside the car stretched out. Nathan reached over and turned the heat up a notch. We've got 2 media vans tailing us, he said, glancing at the rearview mirror. I twisted around. Sure enough, a white news van was keeping pace 2 lanes back. Can you lose them? Let's find out. He pressed the accelerator. The sedan surged forward, slipped through a yellow light, and made a sharp right into a narrow side street. The van hesitated for a critical second. By the time it followed, we had already shot out the other end of the alley and merged into cross traffic.
Not bad, I said.
Your mother paid for very good training. Nathan's tone was deadpan, but the corner of his mouth twitched. The car eventually pulled into the underground parking garage of a modest apartment building. Not luxury high-rises, just a regular complex in a quiet neighborhood. Nathan led me to a small, spotless 1-bedroom on the 4th floor. I've lived here for 5 years, he said, unlocking the door. You stay here tonight. I'll handle things outside. You're going to sleep on the couch? I'll crash at my office. He was already halfway out the door when he paused. There's food in the fridge. The door code is your birthday. Then he was gone, footsteps fading down the hallway. I stood alone in the little apartment. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back an inch. The street below was quiet. No media vans. No baseball caps. I pulled out my phone.
Dead.
I plugged it in and waited for it to power back on. When it did, the notifications flooded in like a dam breaking. Isabella had sent 37 messages, ranging from insults to desperate pleas. The last few were just strings of emoji, Crying faces, broken hearts. Victor's number had called 12 more times, the last attempt only 20 minutes ago. And one message from an unknown number. Miss Vance, this is Daniel Cross again, the reporter from earlier. Your stepmother, Catherine Harrington, just contacted our editorial team. She says she's holding a press conference tomorrow at 9 a.m. to respond to the allegations surrounding Harrington Enterprises. Thought you should know. I stared at that message for a long moment, then dialed Arthur. Catherine is holding a press conference? I just got word, Arthur said, his voice tight. She claims she has a document that could void your entire share transfer. What kind of document? An agreement Victor signed, supposedly invalidating the original stock transfer. She says it proves Margaret used fraudulent means. I stood by the window, tracing a finger through the faint condensation on the glass. Arthur, we both examined that document. It has no legal standing. It doesn't need legal standing, Arthur said. It just needs to create doubt. The moment she waves it in front of the cameras, the story gets muddy. Investors panic. The stock tanks. Even with legitimate shares, you'd be taking over a sinking ship. I was quiet for 2 beats. Book me a spot at that press conference. You want to attend? Catherine has spent 5 years calling my mother a homewrecker. I think it's time we had a face-to-face conversation. I hung up and sat down on the couch. My legs suddenly felt heavy. There were frozen dumplings in the freezer. I boiled a pot of water, cooked them, and ate sitting cross-legged on the floor with a coffee table as my dining table. My phone lit up. Nathan, pick you up at 8:30 tomorrow morning. I replied. Fine. I was on my 6th dumpling when the phone buzzed again. This time it was a video call from Isabella. I answered. Her face filled the screen, hair a tangled mess, makeup smeared, eyes swollen to slits. Evelyn. She was crying before she even got the words out. My mom is holding a press conference and I can't stop her. She says she's going to expose everything about you. She's going to call you an illegitimate child and say your mother trapped Dad by getting pregnant. I picked up my 7th dumpling. Evelyn, are you even listening to me? I'm listening. I dipped the dumpling in soy sauce. Let her say whatever she wants. She'll destroy you. She won't. I ended the video call. I finished the dumplings, washed the bowl, and lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. 22nd birthday. This was how I spent it. I closed my eyes. Victor's voice echoed in the dark. A bastard born from a mistress. I opened my eyes, picked up my phone, and sent Nathan a message. Tomorrow's press conference. I want to bring someone. Arthur's already coming. Someone else. Who? That reporter. Daniel Cross. He helps me. I give him the exclusive. Nathan's reply came after a pause. You're sure about this? I typed back. Catherine wants a public show. I'll give her one. I turned the phone off and pulled the blanket up to my chin. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. The grand ballroom of the Westin Hotel. Catherine Harrington, Victor's wife, my so-called stepmother, was going to stand in front of the cameras and try to tear down everything my mother built. I wondered what color she'd wear. I rolled over and buried my face in the pillow. Probably not black. Black was Margaret's favorite color. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. The little apartment was quiet, pale light filtering through the curtains. For a long moment, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, running through the day ahead in my mind. Nathan arrived at exactly 8:30. He was wearing the same black suit but had added a tie, dark gray, simple. He looked like someone who was about to escort a CEO into a hostile board meeting, which, in a way, he was. Daniel Cross is waiting in the car, he said. I filled him in on the basics. He'll record everything. I grabbed my bag and followed him down to the underground garage. The reporter, Daniel Cross, was a wiry man in his 30s with quick eyes and a notebook he kept flipping open and shut. He sat in the back seat and leaned forward the moment I got in. Miss Vance, I have to tell you, your stepmother's people have been calling every newsroom in the city since 6 a.m. She's promising explosive revelations. Good, I said. That means more cameras. Daniel hesitated. You're that confident? I turned halfway in my seat. Mr. Cross, You're about to get the biggest story of your career. All I ask is that you report what you see and hear accurately.
Can you do that?
Absolutely. Then just keep your phone recording and stay close to me. The Westin Hotel was a gleaming glass tower in the financial district. By the time we pulled into the underground entrance, the front circle was already swarming with news vans, reporters doing stand-ups, and photographers jostling for position. Nathan found a spot in the back service entrance. Arthur was waiting for us by the loading dock, tablet in hand. "Catherine's already inside," he said, falling into step beside me. She brought a forensic document examiner. She's going to claim the original stock transfer signatures were forged. That's her play. I almost laughed. She's going to claim forgery on a document Victor signed in a hospital room with 3 witnesses and a video recording? She's desperate, Arthur said. Desperate people do stupid things. We took the service elevator up to the 3rd floor. The grand ballroom doors were closed, but I could hear the hum of dozens of voices, the click of cameras, the low murmur of anticipation. A hotel staff member tried to stop us at the side entrance, but Nathan flashed some kind of credential, and the man stepped aside. "Ready?" Arthur asked. I smoothed down the front of my black blazer, touched the envelope in my inside pocket, Margaret's letter, still there, and nodded. I pushed the door open. The ballroom was packed. At least 40 journalists, camera crews from 3 networks, and in the front row, a cluster of Harrington Enterprises board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The stage was set with a podium, a large screen, and a table covered with documents. Catherine Harrington stood at the podium in a powder blue suit, her silver blonde hair swept up, pearls at her throat. She looked every inch the respectable executive's wife. When she saw me enter from the side, her composure flickered for just a moment. Then she raised her microphone, and her voice rang through the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, thank you for coming. Today I am going to reveal the truth about who has been attempting to destroy Harrington Enterprises from within. A young woman named Evelyn Vance claims to be the majority shareholder of this company. She is nothing of the sort. Her claim rests on forged documents, a fraud perpetrated by her mother, a woman who is not my husband's wife." Cameras swung toward me. The clicking intensified. I didn't stop walking. I made my way slowly down the side aisle, toward the front of the room. Nathan and Arthur flanked me. Daniel Cross had his phone out, recording, his eyes wide. Catherine's voice grew sharper. "I have here a forensic report that proves the signatures on the so-called stock transfer were not written by my husband. I am calling on the authorities to investigate this fraud immediately." She held up a thick document, waving it like a trophy. I reached the front row. One of the board members, an older man I recognized as the company's former CFO, stared at me with his mouth slightly open. I didn't sit. I turned to face the stage. "Mrs. Harrington," I said, and the microphone at the podium picked up my voice because I was close enough now. The room hushed. "You're holding a forensic report. May I ask who conducted this analysis?" Catherine's smile tightened. "A qualified expert." "A qualified expert who examined the documents this morning, I assume? Because those documents were locked in a safety deposit box until 48 hours ago." I pulled a folder from my bag. "I have here the original stock transfer agreement, signed by Victor Harrington, witnessed by 3 people and notarized. I also have a video recording of the signing." The room erupted. Journalists started shouting questions. Catherine's face went rigid. "That's impossible. The documents were destroyed." "Were they?" I stepped onto the low stage, ignoring the security guard who started toward me, and then stopped when Nathan gave him a look. "Mrs. Harrington, your husband signed over 43% of this company to my mother, Margaret Vance, 5 years ago. He did it willingly. He did it because the company was built on her money, her ideas, and her labor. He did it because she was dying and he thought he could manipulate her into leaving the shares to him when she was gone. He was wrong." I turned to the room. "My mother left those shares to me. Every piece of paper is legal, witnessed, and recorded. The forensic report Mrs. Harrington is waving around was commissioned last night, paid for from her personal account, and based on photocopies, not originals." Catherine's mouth opened and closed. You have no right, No right to what? To my own inheritance. I took another step toward her. You've been calling my mother a mistress for 22 years. You've been telling everyone who would listen that I'm illegitimate, that I'm an embarrassment, that I don't belong. But here's the truth you've been hiding. I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and the large display behind the podium flickered to life. Nathan had synced it remotely. The room gasped. On the screen was a marriage certificate. Victor Harrington and Margaret Vance. Dated 30 years ago. Victor Harrington was married to my mother before he ever met you. I said, my voice steady and clear. They divorced when I was 3, after you entered the picture. You were his secretary, Mrs. Harrington. You knew he was married. You pursued him anyway. The real mistress in this story is you. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Then the cameras went wild. Catherine stumbled back from the podium, her heel catching on the edge of the stage. That's a lie. That certificate is forged. It's on file with the county records office, Arthur said loudly from the front row. Anyone can look it up. A reporter in the second row was already typing furiously on her laptop. Another was on the phone, presumably checking the records. Catherine's face had gone from white to a blotchy, furious red. She grabbed the edge of the podium to steady herself. You think this changes anything? Victor made a mistake marrying her. She was nothing. A nobody. She trapped him with a pregnancy, and he was too honorable to walk away. Honorable. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Let's talk about honor, Mrs. Harrington. Let's talk about the $2 million that went missing from Harrington Enterprises last month. The money that was transferred to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The shell company that traces back to an account in your name. The room erupted again. That's absurd. Catherine shrieked. I have no such account. I pulled another document from my folder. This is a transaction record from the Royal Bank of the Caribbean, dated 3 weeks ago. The account holder is listed as Catherine Harrington. The deposit amount is $2 million. Would you like to explain to these reporters where that money came from? She lunged at me, her composure completely shattered. Nathan moved faster than I could blink, intercepting her before she got within arm's reach. She flailed, her pearls snapping and scattering across the stage floor, little white beads bouncing and rolling in every direction. You little snake, she screamed. You planned all of this. You've been waiting for years. I stepped back, letting Nathan handle her. The security guards finally decided to earn their pay and rushed onto the stage, gently but firmly pulling Catherine away. She kept screaming, her words dissolving into incoherent fury. I walked to the podium and adjusted the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Harrington Enterprises will hold a shareholder meeting on Monday morning. At that meeting, the board will be restructured. The company's finances will be audited by an independent firm, and every person responsible for the embezzlement and mismanagement that has plagued this company will be held accountable. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Some were stunned, some were scribbling notes, some were grinning like they couldn't believe their luck to be in this room. My mother built this company from nothing. She believed in creating something that would last, something that would provide for the people who worked there. For the last 2 decades, Victor Harrington and his associates have treated this company like their personal piggy bank. That ends now. I stepped back from the podium. The reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Nathan appeared beside me, guiding me toward the side door. Daniel Cross, I called out. You wanted an exclusive. Walk with me. The reporter practically vaulted over a chair to follow us. We exited through the side door, down the service hallway, and into a small meeting room that Arthur had reserved. The sounds of the chaos in the ballroom faded behind us. I handed Daniel a USB drive. Copies of everything. The original marriage certificate, the stock transfer, the video of Victor signing, the bank records from the Cayman Islands. It's all yours. Break the story before anyone else. His hands were trembling as he took the drive. Miss Vance, I don't know what to say. Say you'll write the truth. I will. I swear. He left, practically running. Arthur closed the door behind him and let out a long breath. That, he said, was the most satisfying thing I've ever witnessed in 20 years of practicing law. Nathan, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, allowed himself a small smile. The pearls scattering everywhere was a nice touch. Very cinematic. I sank into a chair. The adrenaline that had been carrying me since I walked into that ballroom started to ebb, and suddenly I was aware of how tired I was. What happens now? I asked. Arthur sat down across from me. Now Catherine will be taken in for questioning. The Financial Crimes Unit has been waiting for us to give them the green light. Victor is already in custody. By the end of the day, both of them will be facing serious charges. And the company? The shareholder meeting on Monday will formalize your control. We'll appoint an interim CEO until you decide what you want to do. The stock will take a hit from all this publicity, but in the long run, cutting out the rot will make the company stronger. I nodded, staring at the wood grain of the conference table. All those years of waiting, planning, biting my tongue while Victor sneered, and Isabella preened, and Catherine looked through me like I was a stain on the carpet. All of it, undone in 20 minutes on a stage. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I mostly felt hollow. It was a strange kind of emptiness. For so long, revenge had been the only thing keeping me upright. Every insult, every cold shoulder, every time I had to swallow my pride and disappear into the wallpaper, I had tucked it away as fuel. Now the fuel had been spent, and I was left with the ashes. I wasn't sorry. I would do it all again in a heartbeat, but the silence after the storm was deafening. Arthur watched me carefully. He must have seen this before, the sudden drop after a legal battle. It's normal to feel this way, Evelyn. You've been fighting for survival for so long that peace feels like a threat. Give yourself time to adjust. Nathan, still leaning against the wall, added quietly, Your mother felt the same way after she won the initial proxy battle with Victor years ago. She told me once that victory felt like grief. She said it was because you have to bury the version of yourself that was willing to fight so hard. You have to let it go to make room for who you become next. I looked up at him. She told you that? She told me a lot of things. I was supposed to pass them along when the time was right. He unfolded his arms and walked over to the table. One of them was that you shouldn't judge yourself for feeling sad when you finally win. She said real justice doesn't always come with confetti. Sometimes it just comes with a quiet room and a long exhale. A long exhale. That was exactly what I needed. I want to visit Victor, I said. Arthur and Nathan exchanged a glance. That might not be possible today, Arthur said. He's in federal custody. Then tomorrow. Or the next day. Whenever they let me.
Why?
Nathan asked quietly. I touched the pocket where my mother's letter rested. Because I want to hear him say it, just once, that he was wrong about her. Neither of them argued. The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Arthur's office became a makeshift command center, with paralegals running in and out and a constant stream of reporters calling for comment. The switchboards at Harrington Enterprises lit up nonstop. I authorized a brief press release confirming the shareholder meeting, nothing more. Let Catherine's meltdown be the headline for now. Late that afternoon, a package arrived at Arthur's office addressed to me. Inside was a thick binder with a handwritten note from a name I didn't recognize, Eleanor Whitmore, one of the first employees Margaret ever hired. The note read, Your mother believed in this company's soul. I've been waiting for the day someone would fight for it again. These are the original blueprints and meeting notes from our first year. Please use them to rebuild. I sat with the binder for over an hour, running my fingers over the faded ink. There were sketches of the first product designs, lists of potential investors, and notes in the margins in my mother's handwriting. Ask about their community involvement, not just their balance sheet. Hire for kindness, train for skill. Never forget that a company is just a group of people trying to make a living. Treat them with dignity. The tears I hadn't shed during the press conference finally came. I let them fall onto the old pages, and for the first time, the hollowness inside me began to fill with something warmer. Purpose. By evening, the story was everywhere. Daniel Cross's article had gone live within 2 hours of the press conference, and every major news outlet was running with it. Harrington heiress reveals decades of deceit. Secret marriage certificate exposes CEO's lies. the mistress who wasn't. Isabella called 17 times. I didn't answer any of them. Her messages started furious, turned pleading, and eventually just became strings of question marks. Late that night, back in Nathan's little apartment, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea and finally opened my phone to read the article. Daniel had done a good job. He'd laid out the timeline clearly, included images of the documents, and quoted extensively from my statements at the press conference. The comments section was already in the thousands, most of them expressing shock and support. One comment caught my eye. It was from someone who claimed to have worked for Harrington Enterprises in the early days. Margaret Vance was the smartest, kindest boss I ever had. She built that place with her own 2 hands while Victor took all the credit. I'm so glad the truth is finally out. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. You okay? Nathan was in the kitchen, making himself a sandwich. He'd barely eaten all day. I don't know, I said honestly. I thought I'd feel more. More what? More satisfied. More victorious. Something. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. Instead, I just feel tired. And a little sad. He came over and sat on the armchair across from me. You just publicly destroyed the people who made your life miserable for 22 years. It's okay to not know how to feel about that. My mother wanted this, I said. She set all of it in motion before she died. She knew Victor would turn on me eventually. She wanted me to be ready. She loved you. I know. My throat tightened. But I wish she'd been able to stay. I wish she hadn't spent her last months planning a revenge plot instead of just being with me. Nathan was quiet for a moment. She was with you. The revenge plot was part of how she took care of you. It was the only way she knew to protect you after she was gone. I didn't answer. Outside the window, the Boston skyline glittered, indifferent. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of strategy sessions and damage control for the company. I spent hours on video calls with department heads, reassuring them that their jobs were secure and that the board shakeup was aimed at the top level of corruption, not the rank and file. Many of them had known my mother. Several shared stories of her walking the factory floor at midnight, making sure the overnight crew had hot coffee, or personally calling an employee's spouse when they were sick. I absorbed it all like a sponge, building a picture of the woman I'd lost at 17. On Sunday evening, I stood at the window of the small conference room Arthur had rented near the federal building, watching the sunset bleed into the harbor. Tomorrow was the shareholder meeting. Tomorrow I would officially take control of a company I had barely been allowed to glimpse from the inside. The weight of it pressed on my shoulders. Nathan appeared beside me, a cup of coffee in each hand. He passed one to me. Nervous, terrified, I admitted. What if I'm not her? What if I can't do this? He didn't offer empty reassurance. Instead, he said, "You don't have to be her. You just have to be the person she raised. That's more than enough." I took the coffee and let the warmth seep into my hands. "Thank you for all of this. You didn't have to stay." "Yes, I did." He said it so simply, so factually, that I didn't question it. "Your mother saved my brother's career once, years before she got sick. She believed in second chances. The Shaws don't forget debts like that." "Is that the only reason?" He met my eyes in the glass reflection.
No.
"But it's the reason I'll give you tonight. The rest can wait." Something unspoken passed between us, fragile and tentative, like the first green shoot after a wildfire. I didn't push. He was right, the rest could wait. Monday morning, the shareholder meeting was held in the Harrington Enterprises executive conference room. The board members filed in looking like they were attending a funeral. Some of them had already lawyered up. A few had offered to resign quietly if I would agree not to pursue legal action against them. I sat at the head of the table in a dark gray suit, Arthur on one side and Nathan on the other. The vote was a formality. With 43% of the shares and several smaller shareholders who had thrown their support behind me after the press conference, I had a solid majority. The old board was dissolved. A new interim board was appointed, composed mostly of outside experts Arthur had recommended. The independent audit would begin immediately. The Cayman Islands accounts would be frozen. Victor and Catherine's personal assets were already being seized. After the meeting, The former CFO, the one who had stared at me during the press conference, approached me in the hallway. His name was Gerald something. I couldn't remember. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice hesitant. "I just want you to know, I had no idea about the embezzlement. Victor kept me out of the loop on a lot of things." "Then you weren't doing your job," I said. He flinched. I suppose that's fair. The auditors will determine who knew what. If you're clean, you have nothing to worry about." He nodded quickly and scurried away. Nathan watched him go. "Think he's clean? I doubt anyone in that building is completely clean. But some of them were just incompetent, not criminal. There's a difference?" I almost smiled. One gets you fired. The other gets you arrested. That week, I moved through the company headquarters floor by floor, introducing myself to employees, answering questions, and listening to their concerns. It was exhausting, but every handshake, every skeptical face that softened into cautious hope, rebuilt a piece of me that Victor had tried to shatter. I found my mother's old office, preserved almost exactly as she left it, her notes still pinned to a corkboard, a mug with a faded, "World's Best Mom" label on the shelf. I sat in her chair and cried again, but this time the tears felt cleansing. 3 days after the meeting, I was finally allowed to visit Victor. The Federal Detention Center was a gray concrete building on the outskirts of the city, all fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. I sat in a small visiting room, a pane of scratched plexiglass between me and the chair on the other side. Victor shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week. His hair, always so carefully styled, was limp and unwashed. His face was haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. He sat down heavily and picked up the phone receiver on his side. I did the same. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I guess you think you've won." "I wasn't aware this was a game," I said. His jaw tightened. "Everything I built, everything I worked for,
Gone.
Because of you. Everything you built was built on my mother's money, her ideas, her work. You just took the credit." "That's not true." "It is true, and you know it." I leaned closer to the glass. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I want you to say it. Just once. Say that my mother was not a mistress. Say that you were married to her. Say that she was your wife and you treated her terribly." Victor's face twisted. For a moment, I thought he was going to refuse, to cling to his lies until the bitter end. But then his shoulders sagged. He looked down at the counter in front of him. "We were married," he said, barely above a whisper. "Margaret and I. She was brilliant.
Too brilliant for me.
I always felt like I was chasing her, never quite good enough. Catherine made me feel important, admired." He let out a shaky breath. "I was weak. I made bad choices. And I took it out on you. I waited." "She wasn't a mistress," he said. "Margaret was my wife. And you were always legitimate. I just couldn't admit it. Admitting it would have meant admitting everything else." The words hung in the air between us. I had waited 22 years to hear something like that. And now that it was here, it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt like closure. A door finally closing on a dark room. "Thank you for saying that," I said. Victor looked up, surprised. "That's it? You're not going to gloat? What would be the point?" I stood up and hung the receiver back on the hook. Victor was still staring at me through the glass, his mouth slightly open, as I turned and walked out of the visiting room. Nathan was waiting in the car outside. He didn't ask how it went, and I didn't offer. We drove back to the city in silence, the radio playing soft jazz. Over the next few weeks, the dust began to settle. Catherine was charged with embezzlement and fraud. Victor faced additional counts of tax evasion and conspiracy. The board members who had been complicit resigned or were removed. Harrington Enterprises, battered and bruised, started the slow process of rebuilding. I moved out of Nathan's apartment and into a small but comfortable condo downtown, close to the company headquarters. I wasn't sure I wanted to run the company long-term. I was 22, with no business experience and no particular passion for corporate management, but for now, someone needed to steer the ship. Nathan, as it turned out, had a degree in business administration. He'd been working a quiet desk job for the past 5 years while keeping an eye on me from a distance, per my mother's instructions. I hired him as my chief of staff. The first few weeks in the condo were lonely. Nathan stopped by often, bringing takeout and helping me sort through the piles of documents that seemed to multiply on my dining table. One Friday evening, he arrived with a bottle of wine and a stack of old photographs his brother had found in the firm's archives. Pictures of my mother at company picnics, cutting ribbons at new factory openings, laughing with her arms around employees. We spread them across the floor, and he told me the stories behind each one. This was the day she convinced the bank to double their credit line, he said, pointing to a photo of her in a sharp red blazer, shaking hands with a grim-faced executive. Arthur said she walked in with a 30-page proposal and didn't leave until the manager signed. She bet the entire company's future on that meeting. Was she ever scared? I asked. Constantly. But she always said fear was just a reminder that you were doing something worth being afraid for. I looked at him then, really looked at him, the way the lamplight caught the edges of his jaw, the quiet steadiness in his posture. He must have sensed it, because he turned to meet my gaze, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. Evelyn, he started. I know, I said. The rest can wait. But maybe not too long. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I've waited 5 years. I can wait a little longer. I leaned over and kissed his cheek, a soft, brief press of lips against warm skin. It wasn't a declaration, but it was a promise. A door left deliberately open. Arthur stayed on as the company's legal counsel, though he grumbled that he was getting too old for this much excitement. Under his guidance, we began the painstaking work of untangling the financial mess Victor had left behind. It was like peeling back layers of rot. Each discovery revealed another hidden debt, another questionable deal, another instance of greed papered over with lies. But there were bright spots, too. Loyal employees who had kept their heads down for years suddenly felt free to speak up, offering ideas and innovations that had been smothered under the old regime. I set up an anonymous suggestion box on the company intranet, and within a week it was overflowing with genuine, hopeful proposals. Isabella, after weeks of trying to reach me, finally showed up at my office one afternoon. She looked different.
Thinner.
Her expensive clothes had been replaced with simple jeans and a sweater. Her designer handbag was gone. She stood in my doorway, twisting her fingers together. Can I come in? I nodded. She sat in the chair across from my desk. I'm not here to ask for anything, she said quickly. I wanted to apologize. I waited. Everything I said to you all those years. The way I treated you. I was awful. Her voice cracked. I believed everything Mom and Dad told me. I didn't question it. And now I know it was all lies. Isabella, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. You covered for me when we were kids.
You protected me.
And I repaid you by making your life miserable. I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I know that doesn't fix anything. But I needed you to hear it. I studied her for a long moment. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling. She wasn't performing. For the first time in her life, Isabella Harrington was being completely sincere. I accept your apology, I said. She let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. But that doesn't mean we're going to be best friends overnight. I continued. Trust takes time. If you want to be in my life, you'll have to earn it. I understand. She wiped her eyes. I will. I'll earn it. She stood up to leave. At the door, she paused. Evelyn. Yes. I called you my sister once, when we were little. Do you remember?
I did.
We were 6 and 8, playing in the garden. She'd fallen and scraped her knee, and I'd helped her up and walked her back to the house. She'd held my hand and said, "You're the best sister ever." I remember, I said. I should have kept calling you that. She gave me a watery smile. Goodbye, Evelyn. Goodbye, Isabella. She left, and I sat at my desk for a while, staring at nothing. People were complicated. Even the ones who hurt you could surprise you. Even the ones you thought you hated could show you a sliver of something real. The following Saturday, Isabella showed up at my condo with 2 cups of coffee and a cardboard box. "These are the things I managed to save before the feds seized the house," she explained, setting the box on the kitchen counter. "Some of it is probably junk, but I thought you'd want to go through it." Inside were items I hadn't seen in years. A locket with a tiny photo of my mother, a stack of birthday cards she'd written me that Victor had hidden, and at the very bottom, a small velvet pouch with a delicate silver bracelet, the one Margaret had worn on her wedding day. Attached was a note in Isabella's handwriting. "This belonged to your mom. I found it in Dad's safe. I'm sorry I didn't give it to you sooner." I held the bracelet in my palm, the silver cool and familiar. For the first time since the confrontation at the hotel, Isabella and I didn't feel like enemies. We felt like two women who had both been lied to by the same people, left to pick up the pieces. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, I stood in the cemetery in front of my mother's grave. The headstone was simple: Margaret Vance, beloved mother, builder of dreams. The company was stable. The legal cases against Victor and Catherine were proceeding. Victor had been sentenced to 15 years, Catherine to 8. Isabella and I had coffee once a month, tentatively rebuilding something. Nathan had become not just my chief of staff but one of my closest friends, and more, though we were taking it slow, letting trust grow in the spaces where trauma used to live. Arthur still called me every other day with updates, even when there was nothing to update. The old employees had started calling the office Vance and Company instead of Harrington, an informal tribute that meant more to me than any official rebranding ever could. I knelt and placed a small bouquet of white roses on the grave. White roses had been her favorite. "I did it, Mom," I said quietly. I made him say it, and then I let it go. The wind ruffled my hair. Somewhere in the distance, a bird sang. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the worn envelope with her letter. I had read it so many times the paper was soft and creased. "Don't be scared. The only thing I ever did right in this life was having you." I smiled down at the words. "You did more than one thing right, Mom," I said. "You gave me everything I needed, even when you weren't here." I stood up, brushed the grass off my knees, and walked back down the path to where Nathan was waiting by the car. He opened the passenger door for me, a small, courtly gesture he'd never stopped doing. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." I got into the car and we drove back toward the city. The sky was wide and blue, and the trees along the highway were starting to bloom. In my hand, I held my mother's letter, and in my heart, I held something I hadn't felt in a very long time.
Peace.
2 years later, I stood in that same cemetery on another spring morning, but this time, I wasn't alone. Nathan held my left hand, his thumb tracing absent circles over the simple gold band on my finger. We had married in a quiet ceremony at the courthouse, with Arthur as our witness and Isabella as the only family member in attendance. She had cried through the whole thing, clutching a handkerchief embroidered with our mother's initials that she'd found in the box of keepsakes. My other hand rested on the gentle swell of my belly, now just beginning to round with the child we were expecting. A daughter, the doctors said. We planned to name her Margaret. I brought her flowers again, I said to the headstone, laying down a fresh bouquet of white roses, just as I had every visit. But this time I also brought news. You're going to be a grandmother. Nathan knelt beside me and placed his own offering on the grave, a small, flat stone painted with a child's handprint. Leo, Isabella's new son, had made it for Auntie Evelyn's mommy. I'd cried when she gave it to me. She would be proud of you, Nathan said. Not just for the company, but for the family you've built. I looked at him, at the soft lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago, at the steady, patient love that had never once rushed me. We built it, together. The company was thriving now, no longer the sinking ship I had seized. We had renamed it Vance Enterprises the previous year, and the stock had not only recovered but soared, fueled by a new line of sustainable products and a corporate culture that put employees before profits. The suggestion box I'd set up had evolved into a full innovation lab, and 3 of our best-selling ideas had come from junior staff members who had never been listened to before. Eleanor Whitmore, the former employee who had sent me the binder, had come out of retirement to serve as a consultant, and she'd told the press that Margaret's spirit was finally back in the building. I crouched down one last time and pressed my palm to the cool stone. I'll bring her here when she's old enough.
I'll tell her about you.
About how you built a company with nothing but grit and hope. About how you loved me enough to protect me even after you were gone. My voice caught, but I pushed through. She'll know your name, Mom. She'll know she comes from a line of women who refuse to be erased. Nathan helped me to my feet, steadying me with a hand on my elbow. We walked slowly back to the car, past the sprawling oak tree where I had once sat as a child, dreaming of a mother I barely remembered. Now I carried her in my bones, in my decisions, in the future I was building. As we drove away, I looked out the window at the blue sky and thought about the letter still folded in my pocket, the one that had started it all. Don't be scared. I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready.
For the company. For the baby.
For whatever came next. The only thing I ever did right in this life was having you. She'd been wrong about that. She'd done so much more. And now it was my turn to do the same for my daughter. I leaned my head against Nathan's shoulder and closed my eyes. Peace, it turned out, wasn't a destination. It was a road you chose to walk every single day with the people you loved beside you. And I intended to walk it for the rest of my life.